Hello, my name is Valerie Worthington, and this is the latest in a series of conversations I'm getting to have with some of my friends in the Jiu-Jitsu community who are experts in other areas as well that are helpful to those of us who train and also those of us who are just trying to navigate life in the time of the pandemic. This is part of a larger project called Grappling with Answers. If you like what you are seeing here, please feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel of the same name and find us on Facebook. And that being said, I'm really happy today that I get to talk to my friend Tim Dawson, who is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and an attorney, among many other things. But Tim, thank you so much for joining me today. The first question I have for you is if you would be willing to just say a little bit about your Jiu-Jitsu experiences and background, and then maybe talk a little bit about how the pandemic is affecting that for you.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Valerie. First of all, thank you for having me do this conversation. This is really, really cool. And I like talking to you just in general. So I'm happy to come on and do this for you. So my background is I have a bachelor's degree in finance and I have a law degree from Georgetown. I spent the last 8 or 9 years or so working as a lawyer and lobbyist in the DC area. I've been all over the country in state houses, doing all sorts of stuff. I think towards the end of my career, I was more lobbyist than lawyer. So did that. I've worked in the States. I've also worked on Capitol Hill quite a bit. So, I have pretty good experience. I was a pretty good law student. So I tend to know a little bit about it, a little bit more than the average bear. The pandemic has affected and I guess my jiu-jitsu background. I started training many years ago at Beta Academy in DC under Nakapan Pungaporn, who's a great, well-known coach in this area and an awesome competitor in his own right. I trained with him for about 5 years, and then I eventually joined Dave Jacobs' Academy out in Vienna. So Dave, as everyone in the community knows, passed away back in 2018, and after that, really just sort of unexpected event, I partnered up with my brother from another mother, Matthew Miller, and we opened up High Noon BJJ just to give the students from the old academy a new home. So the pandemic has affected this entire community just almost like no other. Like our sport is extremely close contact, and we just can't do it under these circumstances. There's no way to do it and put appropriate social distancing measures in place unless you want to just do drilling with dummies or something like that. And I've seen a lot of great ideas surrounding that kind of practice, but for us, we just had to close down. We were one of the first gyms in this area to just decide to close. Matt and I decided it was not a good idea to stay open. One, because we didn't know exactly what was going on with the virus. I had read that it was really dangerous and that it was highly, highly transmissible. And, I have older members of the gym. I'm sure there are people that have, breathing difficulties, asthma, stuff like that. I was not going to be responsible for anyone catching this thing and God forbid getting hurt. That would have just broken my heart. I feel, rightly or wrongly, you start to feel responsible for your students. You love them over the years too, and you just don't want anything bad to happen to them. So I didn't feel like we could stay open in good conscience. So that's really the crux of it. We're just shut down, and we've had to wait until we know more about it, and we can figure out a safe way to be open again.
I think it's on every jiu-jitsu gym owner's mind, and it's on every practitioner's mind, because we all want to go back to training, but we all are also sort of under the specter of not really knowing exactly what we're contending with. Since this isn't formal hard journalism, I am going to take the liberty of interjecting that, as you know, I was good friends with Dave too, and I also bore witness to you and Matt kind of taking over the reins and jumping in where there was a leadership void and just a lot of emotion. And I know how many people really appreciate what you and Matt are doing to keep Dave's memory alive, to enable people to continue to train. And so I feel really, really privileged to have been able to witness that. So I'm getting a little choked up, but anyway.
No, Val,
So,
I want to say this too. Thank you so much for saying that. This situation, you know, I think we got like, it was just not something Matt and I expected to do in our 30s. I did not have any desire or need to be a gym owner. You know, just financially, professionally, or otherwise. I always just enjoyed training hard and getting better at jiu-jitsu. And I think a lot of people don't understand how much it takes away from your own personal development, your own jiu-jitsu when you become a coach. You know, Matt and I spend many nights coaching where we would love to just be training hard like we used to. You know, I think Matt and I love each other because we used to train so hard together. Like he was a guy I couldn't break, and vice versa, and we became good friends because of that. So, you know, Open and High Noon was just like a labor of love that we felt like we had to do. Dave's loss hit me really hard. Dave always treated me like a son, for no reason. I don't know why. He was just that kind of person. And I know, for example, like right after he passed, at least when we found out about it on that Saturday, that Sunday, I didn't know what to do. Like Dave had turned over the wrestling class to me, you know, like maybe a year or two before that. But he would always come on Sunday. He would always show up and come and hang out with me and tell stories and interrupt my class in hilarious ways. And it was just like one of the best days of the week for me, hands down. And I remember standing in front of the class and I was like explaining what we're going to do for the day. And I looked over at the door, and I cannot recall like openly weeping in front of a group of people ever in my whole life. I just started crying. Like I could not stop myself because I knew like he wasn't going to come through the door ever again. And I would have given, you know, freaking anything just to like see him walk in one more time. So, you know, I remember like feeling like that, and the fact that I like had gotten so close to Dave and loved him so much. And a lot of that was just because of the environment he created in his gym. You know, I felt ultimately like I wanted to try and do that again. I wanted to create like a home for people where, you know, they just felt like it was a second home. You know, they felt loved, they felt accepted there. It was just kind of our place together. So he meant a lot to me. So High Noon means a lot to me and Matt for that reason, because we wanted to try and recreate that same environment. I'm sorry, I know that's a tangent, but I just.
No, it's not a tangent. This is the rub, right? Where the relationships that you've created in jiu-jitsu are part of what make you want to train so much.
Right.
But on the flip side of it, I'm guessing that that's also part of what made you shut down so quickly, because you care about the people that are your students. And then you layer on top of it this aspect of the legality of the orders and the directives that we're receiving from various levels of government. A couple of weeks ago, I noticed on your Facebook feed, you had asked a series of questions about this, just as a general kind of discussion starter. And what I appreciated is that you made it clear you weren't trying to flame anybody. You weren't trying to call somebody out to then give them a hard time. You were just wondering how are people making their decisions or learning about many things, one of which is some of the directives that we've been given, like shelter in place, only essential businesses can be open, et cetera. So I'm wondering if you'd say a little bit about your inspiration for doing that and what you found out.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I posted that because I had been seeing just a plethora of different posts from people over the weeks as the pandemic kind of drug on. And I think those posts took on a certain character that I could just group into like 4 or 5, like, you know, questions that have been stated many different ways that I just kept seeing over and over again. So my goal was to kind of like, you know, summarize those things and give my opinion on them, and then ask maybe a few questions that I thought actually really just not even give my opinion, ask a few questions and give people an opportunity and a safe space to clarify what they mean, or like why they had been posting opinions like that, or just what they had thought of other people posting opinions like that. I think the first one, I'd have to go back and look at the post really quick, Val. I kind of have not forgotten it completely, but I'd like to go and take a look at exactly how I worded it.
And that's an interesting point because
Oh yeah, here we are.
wording is so important these days, right? Because people can misunderstand or take things in a way that wasn't intended. So yeah,
Right.
go ahead and share.
So what I learned there was the first question I asked was the first thing I summarized was the government is violating my rights in some sort of way. And then I asked like why, someone thinks the government is violating their rights and what are they basing that belief on? And I asked it that way because I had gotten the sense that people felt like their rights were being violated, but they weren't exactly clear legally how that worked or like why their rights were violated. Like, what does that really mean? They just felt that way, and I wanted to like add some clarity and some actual, legal knowledge to their opinion if possible, without being mean. I think when you're talking about sensitive subjects and you actually want people to discuss it, you have to try and be kind, or people will clam up, dig their heels in, and you won't make any progress. I think the second thing I asked that I saw a lot was that there's some sort of agenda or conspiracy afoot. And I think whenever the word conspiracy is brought up, I think people should always be asking very clearly, like, what is the agenda exactly? What are you talking about? Like, clarify it, like, articulate it. Where did you learn that from, and why do you think that source is credible? And I don't think people ask that question enough. And then the last question you should always ask when you're presented with a conspiracy theory is, if this conspiracy theory was true and the source is credible, this is real, what would the person perpetuating the conspiracy gain if they were to be successful? So, I use this like when I'm talking to people about like flat Earth, for example. Okay, say the Earth is flat. What does anyone gain by tricking you into believing it's spherical? Like, what does anyone gain by that? And if you can't find a good answer for that, it's probably like a silly conspiracy, right? And it'd be vice versa. If the Earth if we believed the Earth was flat, what would anyone gain by fooling you into believing it's spherical? Like, what is the like? I think you always have to ask that question. What is there to gain?
That's
Anyways.
a lot of work that would be a lot of work for a very little reward.
Right, yeah, what's the reward there? And if there's no reward, there's not going to be a global conspiracy, guys. I know for a fact, anecdotally, that if you want to keep a secret, just don't tell anyone. I can't even imagine millions and millions of people keeping a secret like that and not having it get out. The third one I saw was the death rate of the virus is really low, and that the measures being taken are disproportional to the danger at hand. I actually, I agree. That's a reasonable feeling people are going to have. So, I asked if people had considered the capacity of the healthcare system overall, what measures do they think should be taken, and why do they think they're qualified to figure out what measures should be taken? I'm a lawyer, and I'm a black belt at Jiu-jitsu. I don't know anything about epidemiology. I don't even feel qualified to suggest measures. I don't know what should be done because I'm ignorant in that way. I just have no idea what makes sense. And I wish more people felt like that about subjects that they're not experts in. And then the last one, which I maybe is the most reasonable bit of pushback, is that the economic fallout caused by the shutdown is going to cause more suffering than the pandemic actually will in the long run. That's really plausible. I don't know how to feel about that either. I'm also not an economist. I have a finance degree. I studied economy a little bit, but economics a little bit. But who knows? Maybe it's that if people fall into enough poverty, more people will start dying over the long run because they're in abject poverty. I don't know. So I asked, why do you think that's the case, and what are you basing your opinion on? I was hoping to actually have people post some studies, white papers, interesting things they have found along those lines, just so I could learn something. So those were my goals, Val. I just wanted to talk to people in the community, figure out what they thought, and give people a safe space to say, I hate the government, or like whatever they wanted to say, without people saying you're an idiot, you're stupid, blah 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 blah. No one's gonna talk to you if you act like that. you know.
I agree, especially if it's if people feel like they were baited. But I read through the thread and didn't see that at all. I saw a lot of reasoned discussion and I saw some emotion, but people generally being respectful of each other and really trying to have an open mind. If we
Right.
go back to the first question that you asked, Tim, that seems like it falls under your professional and expertise bailiwick, this idea of my rights are being violated. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of these directives that we talked about earlier, shelter in place, what constitutes an essential business, and from your perspective, what is happening? Are any rights being violated? If so, what's the recourse? If not, then what do we take away from that?
Right. And I think that's a really, really great question. And it's one you just see over and over again. People feel like their rights are violated. So just in general, I wanted to try and share with everyone that had that concern. And it's not that they have to agree with it, but the fact is the government is not violating your rights. Back in 1905, there was a Supreme Court case called Jacobson versus Massachusetts. And in that case, the plaintiff sued the state of Massachusetts because they were forcing people or requiring people to get smallpox vaccinations. So this is a total different issue, I guess, in character, but it is actually very similar. So the state was forcing people to get smallpox vaccinations. This guy refused, thought that there should be exceptions for individuals, blah, 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 et cetera. And basically, this was where the Supreme Court first said straight out that basically that individual rights could be reasonably restricted in the case of a public health emergency. And I think under any stretch of the imagination, if you don't believe in some sort of weird conspiracy theory, COVID-19 is real, it can kill people, it spreads incredibly quickly, and we don't currently have a vaccine. So I think under any just reasonable consideration, COVID-19 would be considered a global health emergency. But in the States, the government has the power to restrict your rights, no matter what those are, when there's an emergency. And I think a lot of people just didn't know that. They weren't sure that what the government was doing was legal. They were like, can the government force me to stay home? Can the government take away my right to assemble, et cetera? Can the government force you to get a vaccination? Yes, this happened all the way back in 1905. This has been a part of legal precedent for over 100 years now. The second time this came up was in a case called Zucht versus King, and I think that was in 1922, another Supreme Court case. And basically the court just sort of upheld their decision in Jacobson versus Massachusetts. So there's a second case, and I think very even recently there was a case where there's a Texas regulation that was halting abortions or something like that. I haven't read that case in its entirety, but basically they used that precedent just recently, like this year, in a case that came out of Texas. So that precedent still stands. The court hasn't overturned it. So, the fact of the matter, like I said, is the government's not, what they're doing is not illegal. Now, whether or not that's right is a whole other story, or whether or not you agree with it is a whole other story. But I think a lot of people would possibly feel a lot calmer if they realize that the government's not actually violating their rights. And so that's what I wanted to add to the discussion, if that makes sense.
I'm muted. I just
Okay,
unmuted.
there you
go. So the question on everyone's mind is, what kind of pizza was
it? Cheese pizza and pepperoni for Teddy, and then I think I got some chicken bacon bites or something from Domino's. Domino's sucks, but it's very edible these days.
Well, and so you've basically, in the last 30 seconds, you've sort of encapsulated life during a pandemic, where you're parenting, you're talking to me, you're sheltering in place, you're trying to feed your kid, all those things all at once are happening all at once. So,
Right.
so that's perfect. So I think you raised a really important point, which is that maybe people will feel more comfortable knowing that their rights are not being infringed upon. That being said, you also mentioned that people may not necessarily agree with these rules, and from a legal standpoint, there are legal scholars who spend their careers interpreting cases, interpreting law, interpreting the Constitution in different ways. And so, what would you say to someone who doesn't necessarily agree with the way the law is being implemented right now?
Right. And I should say, just to clarify, their rights are being infringed, but it's legal.
My mistake.
In this particular case. So if you don't agree with like how it works, and like you want to change it or something like that, you can always, like, people can get groups together, go to an organization that cares about, like, say, the Second Amendment, go to an organization that cares about the First Amendment. There are a ton of nonprofit organizations around the country that you're welcome to get involved in. Ask them to sue on your behalf. Give them a particularly egregious example that really affected you in your life. Maybe you're a small business owner and you lost your business. Maybe whatever, whatever you could think of. It has to be like a really compelling story, compelling situation, and see if you can get one of those organizations to help you. Actually, I guarantee those organizations are already looking for a compelling, interesting plaintiff so they can sue the government for stuff like this. Now, the path to getting Supreme Court precedent overturned is just very long and arduous. It doesn't happen very often. The court has a principle called stare decisis, which basically just refers to their great respect for precedent. They try their best not to overturn reasonable decisions, despite the fact that the court is going to change character over the years. Sometimes it's more conservative, sometimes it's more liberal, sometimes it's somewhere in between. If they constantly just overturned opinions just because you have a bunch of conservatives on the court, then it'd be hard for the public to respect the court at all. So this principle of stare decisis is really important to the court, and it's why decisions stand for 100 years. If it's reasonable, they'll revisit it if someone, if they grant certiorari to a case, they decide to hear a case, but often they're not going to overturn it unless there's some really, really, really extremely compelling reason. Now, so I would say the path to change something like this is long. Your other path is to go through the legislative branch. Talk to your congressman, talk to your senator, see if this is a cause they want to take up in Congress. Congress can always change the law. With this type of thing where we're dealing with rights and police powers, though, this is just sort of buried in the Constitution. States have what's called police powers. That's like a constitutional grant. Basically, anything that the federal Constitution doesn't explicitly cover, that right is granted exclusively to the states. So that's why the power that you have seen used on the public is coming from the governors, right? These are stay-at-home orders coming from the governors, not from President Trump, not from anyone in the federal government. It's because the states have those police powers. They are in complete control in a state of emergency. So once the governor of your state declares a state of emergency, you are at their mercy. So this is just, again, you can go through the legislative branch, try to change your state constitution. It's almost impossible to change the federal constitution. Like, your path to change this kind of stuff is long and arduous, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't undertake it. So I think people have options. Typically people like to complain, though, and they don't want to really get on their horse and do the difficult work it takes to change something like this. But that's just sort of the state of things. I think it also just sort of highlights how important it is to be an informed, active citizen. Go vote, write letters to your congresspeople, write letters to your state senators, write letters to your city council people. These people can affect your lives greatly, with decisions they make, a lot of times casually. I've been a lobbyist. A lot of times they make decisions on stuff that they've just read a brief about in 10 minutes, and then they have to vote on it. So your input actually helps. If you're an expert on something, or you've done a lot of research, or you're just really, really passionate about it, talk to those people. Matt and I, for example, have like been up in arms about lane filtering on motorcycles. We would like to be able to lane filter in Virginia. So there was a bill last session, it didn't pass. We'll probably like try and get it passed next session if we can. Like, I want that to happen. That's something I'm passionate about, you know? So, you know, go try and help.
So along those lines of becoming active and also specifically of educating yourself, where can people go? Where could a layperson like me go to educate herself more about shelter in place, or about learning what constitutes an essential business, or anything related to the rules and directives that are coming down that affect me?
Yeah, so for the average individual in a state, we'll use Virginia because I'm in Virginia. You got to go to the state's, you know, particularly the governor's website. Usually we'll have just sort of news blasts about any orders that are put out there. You can also check the legislative website and look for individual bills and stuff like that. But as a layperson, you're better off following the news, particularly that comes out of the governor's office. That's where you'll find the written text of any specific stay-at-home order or directive, and then typically, like, along with the actual order, which there will be some legalese within, which may be difficult for a layperson to understand. They'll typically have a news or a press release that sort of gives a lay explanation of what the order does, and also give you some guidance. Like, for example, you know, it's a stay-at-home order. You're not supposed to go anywhere unless you absolutely have to. But if you go and read the guidance, like the press release guidance, very closely in Maryland, for example, you'll learn that the police are not going to stop you and ask for documentation. You'll learn that they are directed, the police forces are directed to just leave people alone pretty much, unless they have some specific reason to check in with you. So you're more free than you think, even under a stay-at-home order. Also, for example, you're allowed to drive for pleasure. Like, people don't know that. Like, if you want to take a motorcycle ride or you want to take a car ride to clear your head, you're allowed to do that. And you wouldn't know that unless you went to the governor's site, looked at that press release, and just sort of read the FAQ or whatever they put out. So I think go to those official sources. If you are a lawyer, or you understand that language pretty well, or you've worked in that field, then just read the executive order. It's not that hard to understand. But if you feel like even that's difficult for you, just read the press releases. There's good information. There's videos out too. Every governor has done a press conference where they answer questions from reporters. All of these questions that you know, I just gave for an examples, people have asked in press conferences, and reporters are super smart. They cover these issues. They're going to ask questions you didn't even think to ask. So, you know, instead of complaining, like, you know, getting in a tizzy, go find information from reputable sources and educate yourself. And then after that, if you're still mad, like I said, take those paths we talked about earlier. But I think a lot of people just don't educate themselves. They think, like, I'm stuck in the house, I'm not even allowed to drive, blah, blah, and then it's not even true. You know, they haven't really checked it out. So
it occurs to me also that being more being more conversant in what the legislature is doing, that can also help as things do start to open up, which they're starting to do, for better or worse. That you can get a better sense of what you're, again, advised to do, what you're required to do, if you stay up to date. So if you really are, you know, wanting to get out and about, then you can find out as soon as it's allowed.
yeah, exactly. That you want to get out, like, go educate yourself, and you'll know exactly when that's going to happen. And for me specifically, in Virginia, May 15th has been put out as the date where non-essential businesses will be allowed to reopen with restrictions, of course. And I think that's an issue, like, everyone cares. I'm sorry, Val, I may be like overstepping sort of the agenda here, but
It's okay.
I wanted to talk about that as a gym owner. So, you know, what is that? That's in not that many days. May 15th is next week. Do we open on May 15th? And that's a question Matt and I are struggling with, and I don't know how to answer that right now. I'm reading every single white paper and study about the virus that I've seen. Is it possible for people to get reinfected? How is this thing transmitted? Do masks help? Is it more transmissible when you're sweaty and exercising? You know, all of this stuff is like super important. So I've been trying to educate myself as much as possible about a subject that I don't know anything about. I've been watching the CDC, I've been watching WHO, I've been watching Dr. Fauci, you know, from the White House. Like, I've been watching this great doctor from South Korea that, you know, they did really well, sort of squishing the pandemic in that country. So I've been watching like his recommendations as well. Just doing everything I can. I've been looking at Sweden. They just like decided they were going to do herd immunity, and a ton of people died. But it does seem like it sort of worked. They just decided not to care about people dying, and then people got immune to it. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what we should do as a community. I'm just worried about my students, and I'm going to remain worried about them. So, like I said, a lot of states have these dates that are set that are probably too early. And I don't know what to do about that because I have students chomping at the bit to get back. They don't care. You know, they're just like, I know it's dangerous. I don't care. I want to train. I think I'd rather die than just not train. You know, that's how people feel. So we're at that situation where we're stuck weighing like economic and emotional mental damage against the public health. And I'll let you chime in here, but I do have some opinions on like why, like what I think we did wrong. And this is just my stupid opinion, but I think like we've missed the window that we had to kind of compress this in an intelligent way as a country, you know?
It seems like what's occurring to me as I listen to you talk is that the issues that you're raising are the ones that accompany and sort of wrap around the legal and economic ones, right? So you've got what the law says, you've got what economics predicts, but you've also got the very real potential of a human toll.
Right.
And we as a world, I think, are not educated enough yet about what we're dealing with in order to make some of those ethical choices, some of those humanitarian choices. I'm not finding the right word, but I think you know what I mean. So
Right.
so I think that, and that you've just described probably the conundrum that every business owner, but particularly a jiu-jitsu business owner, is struggling with. How do you strike a balance between providing a service that you want to provide and that you want to avail yourself of yourself, make a living, but also be respectful of and watch out for your fellow human beings?
Yeah.
And we don't know the answer.
Yeah, it's just really tough. I think that maybe, like I said, I want to I want to just caveat that this is just my opinion. I don't even think it's possible I'm totally wrong about this, but I feel like we had an opportunity months ago to deal with this in a much more intelligent way. And I think if we had, we would be close to reopening now without people worried about being worried about this spiking upwards again. I think when we knew that this was a problem, we should have hard quarantined, closed the borders to travel, and like done a real quarantine. Like everyone get enough food and water and stay inside for 2 weeks, period. Like an enforced quarantine, not like a suggested stay at home order, which is even what we're basically under now. You know, everyone can kind of decide on their own whether they're going out for an essential mission or not, and there's no real way to enforce it. Like, how do you enforce it without bringing like the National Guard in, anyways? I think we needed to do that though, like that kind of hardcore quarantine months ago. And if we'd done that and made everyone stay at home, like during the possible incubation period of this virus, we would have known exactly who is sick or not sick. You could contact trace, you can do all sorts of stuff. And I think the virus would have been like mostly controlled. We decided not to do that because our administration decided to waffle a little bit about whether or not this was serious. There was a lot of back and forth, like this is a hoax at first, this is not a hoax, but it's not serious. Then it's like, okay, it's kind of serious, but we can handle it. Then it was like, okay, it's very serious. A lot of people are going to die. Like there was so much back and forth. Like instead of just like saying, okay, we're gonna take this serious. We saw what's happening in other countries, and we're gonna quarantine so that we can like spare Americans from, an extended shutdown like we have now. So because of all that waffling now, like we're all the way here in May, nearly mid-May, and we're not sure when is the right time to open up because we did nothing to suppress this. We didn't take it serious. So as a business owner, that's super frustrating. Super, super frustrating.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but what you're describing in terms of closing borders and quarantining people, doing what you described as a hard quarantine, that would have been legal, correct?
It would have.
Yeah.
If our administration had admitted or accepted that this was a public health emergency, if the governments had all decided, okay, this is real, this is an actual emergency, declare emergency and quarantine everyone. Okay, guys, you got to stay in for 14 days. That's about how long it takes to know whether you have this or not. And like, it's really like the time frame to get better if you do have it. Come out of the house if you need medical treatment, and that's it. That's what should have happened, in my opinion. And I think if we had done that, we would be open by now, and everyone would be at the beach and enjoying themselves. And we're not, and it's frustrating. I'm sick of being at home. I'm not a person that's prone to depression, and I'm like sad. I hate this. I have a lot of physical energy that I need to expel, and I can't because I'm stuck at home. I know a lot of people feel like that. A lot of people need to work. They're hourly workers. They're struggling financially because of this. Parents are even the ones that are lucky enough to still have an income because they're working at home. All of a sudden, they're doing childcare and teaching and work all at the same time. People are stuck in the house with alcoholics and abusers and all sorts of crap because this is extended way too long. Like I think we could have all borne 2 weeks or 3 weeks even, but this is extreme. This has gotten to the point where it's extreme, and you have people that are, on the internet. You have a lot of like, you're an idiot, you're selfish, you don't care about everyone else, and you have people like me that just try and give out accurate information, and you have the people that are like the economy, my rights, and to be honest, they all have good points. And I think that's what more people need to realize. Like all of those concerns are very valid,
And that's another reason that I appreciated what you did on Facebook. Because I agree with you. There are all kinds of competing opinions, all kinds of competing needs, and each of them is valid. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of competing needs, a lot of competing opinions are valid. So, what have I not asked you, or what are any thoughts that you have about what we've been discussing that I didn't ask you about, or that you think needs to be expressed?
Honestly, I think this was a good conversation. I think you covered all of the major stuff really well. I would reiterate for people, take the time to educate yourself about things that you decide to talk about, and you decide to engage in. Don't go out and post things. Don't repost stupid memes. Don't like repost articles from. I was online, and Aaron France. I don't know if you know Aaron France. He trains at Beta. He's been in the community a while. He's a black belt, but he's like, people repost some article from like, they're like a self-described like patriot, blah 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 blah, and they're upset about their rights, and they repost some article from like freedomeagle.facebook.ru, right? And like that's accurate. People are like reposting stuff that's like actual propaganda, like that Iran or Russia created, and they're not like making a point to go to reputable sources. They're not even doing a cursory Google search. Did this thing I'm reposting actually happen? Is this true? Let me check Snopes real quick or something. They're not even doing that. They're just like reposting shit that I'm sorry, excuse my language, reposting stuff that agrees with their their opinion, and they're not like, they don't have an open mind about knowledge and critical sources, or critical thinking, and credible sources. So I want people to educate themselves, learn about the subject from reputable sources. If you don't know what that means, ask someone. You probably have a friend that is a scientist, is an educator, is a lawyer, whatever. Ask them like, hey, how do I determine what a real source is? An IT guy can help you with that. Well, take a look at the URL. Like, where did that come from? Is it from like a .ru address? Did it originate in some other country? Did it originate from some throwaway IP in Malaysia? it's probably propaganda, man. And, you know, it's not something you should be reposting. They're trying to rile you up. This happens. Russia has been doing this for decades and decades. Like that's their war against America, destabilization, and they're good at it.
So
I just want people to educate themselves.
absolutely. So two final points. The first one is that one of the people that I got to talk to recently is the Reverend John Jensen, who
Yeah.
I think you know. He was also a very good friend of Dave Jacobs's, and he has the mouth of a sailor. So the the fact that you said the S word, it pales in comparison to what he said. What I was privy to when we were chatting. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that I had the opportunity to talk with Betsy O'Donovan and Chris Amico, who are both jiu-jitsu people and journalists. And so we talked about kind of journalism in general, but one of the things we were thinking we would do as a follow-up is a how-to, sort of a workshop on how you can evaluate sources, because I know that there are so many people in the world who don't trust anybody. They don't trust experts, they don't trust the media, they don't trust each other. But eventually, if you want to make some decisions, you have to ground them in some sort of data or some sort of rationale. And so I'm hoping that Betsy and Chris can speak to this and help people learn how to evaluate sources and evaluate data in ways that will help them do what you're suggesting, which is educate themselves in ways that they feel that they're getting accurate information.
Right.
So,
I do think, Val, that takes a lot of careful thought. And I think oftentimes when people post or decide to argue about something, particularly online, they're just very emotional about it. Another thing you can do is just calm down first before you post something. Like take some time, something you're mad about, like settle down and see how you feel in a couple hours even. A lot of times that'll change the character of what you decide to post. Another thing that I worry about though is that a lot of this is very nuanced. Like you can see a very credible looking study, for example, that says cigarettes are good for your health. And maybe you don't think to like look all the way in the fine print at the end of the study and see like, oh, this was like financed by a cigarette company. A lot of people don't notice stuff like that. So they'll be like, well, I saw a study that said this. Well, there's studies out there that are going to say all types of stuff. Like you probably need to go to like an academic journal and like read a group of studies. They do literature reviews, for example, where they take 60, 70 studies that are out there and someone summarizes those. So you can kind of see like which way the needle is pointing overall. Like maybe 80% of the studies say global warming is real, and like a few that are financed by ExxonMobil and places like that say that it's not real. Well, I'm probably going to go with that 80% of the studies that don't have some sort of financial tie to a certain conclusion. So I worry about the average Joe's ability to do that sort of nuanced analysis of a source. And I don't know what to do about that. I think like that's a great idea, like a how-to from people like, look, we don't have an agenda. We just study things and we've read a lot of papers and we know how to do research. Here's what you should be looking for when you read something on the internet. I think that would be super helpful. I would love to be a part of that if you guys need an extra set of eyes and ears, even if it's just editing or reviewing or something like that. I'm happy to help.
Thank you. That would be awesome. And I like to think that even the most suspicious person hopefully would recognize that this is a way that you can empower yourself and contribute to your own knowledge, like you were saying. So yeah. Tim Dawson, thank you so much for chatting with me. I appreciate it. I learned a ton, and now I want to go read some legislative documents.
Go read some legislative documents, go read some Supreme Court cases, and thank you, Valerie. It was wonderful to see your face and get to have a convo with you. I'm happy to do this. This was super fun.
We'll find another reason to do it, but meantime, go have some pizza.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.